come on, man. I didn't even get a chance, whether I was wrong or right.
Before the world lost Tupac Shakur, Snoop Dogg lost a brother. For decades, he stayed silent about the night everything changed, the night Tupac was shot in Las Vegas. Now, Snoop's finally telling the truth. Not about the headlines, not about the East Coast-West Coast feud, but about what really happened behind closed doors. How a friendship built on loyalty and love turned into fear, distance, and heartbreak, and the final words that still haunt him to this day. Because, as Snoop himself once said, "When I walked into that hospital room, I fainted." Imagine this: Los Angeles, 1993. The rap world is changing, the streets are buzzing, and two young stars are about to cross paths at the rap party for poetic justice. That's where it all started. Tupac Shakur, already a force in Hollywood, hands a blunt to a young Snoop Dogg, and that simple moment sparks a bond that would change hip-hop history. Snoop later joked, "I was a zigzag man before that Pac the one who got me smoking blunts." But beneath the laughter, that night marked the birth of something deeper: brotherhood. Both men were born in the same year, 1971. Both products of struggle, both visionaries raised by strong mothers, both driven to turn pain into power. They joined forces under Death Row Records, the most feared label in the game, led by Dr. Dre and Suge Knight. Together, they helped define the West Coast sound, dropping classics like two of America's Most Wanted and All About You. Fans saw them as unstoppable, the perfect mix of raw street energy and poetic soul. On stage, they were larger than life, but off stage, they were just two young men trying to make sense of fame, loyalty, and survival. Snoop once said in a Hall of Fame speech years later, "He saw more potential in me than I saw in myself." Tupac saw Snoop not just as a rapper, but as a leader, a storyteller, even an actor. And he was right, because soon that encouragement would push Snoop to step beyond the studio and into fatherhood, community, and legacy. By the mid-90s, Snoop Dogg was standing at a crossroads that very few artists ever face. His debut album, Doggy Style, had just made history as the first debut rap album to open at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling over 800,000 copies in its first week. Practically overnight, a young kid from Long Beach had become the face of West Coast rap. But behind the platinum records, the fame, and the headlines, something far more personal was happening. Snoop was learning how to be a father. His first son, Cord, had just been born, and while the world saw Snoop as the cool, untouchable rapper, he privately admitted he was struggling to balance music and fatherhood. Fame, he realized, didn't come with a manual for raising a child. That's when Tupac Shakur, the man who lived as loudly as he rapped, quietly stepped in. During the recording of Tha Dog Father, Snoop would often bring baby Cord to the studio. The sessions were chaotic, beats blasting, producers shouting, and the haze of weed smoke hanging thick in the air. It was the kind of environment where time slipped away, where hours could pass in what felt like minutes. And then, out of nowhere, Tupac would break through the noise and remind Snoop of something bigger than music. "Ayo, Snoop," he'd say, "the baby ate yet?" That single line hit Snoop like a slap of reality. In that moment, Tupac wasn't the outlaw or the icon. He was the friend who saw the man behind the microphone. Snoop later told People magazine, "Tupac loved him. It's like his nephew. Tupac was a better dad than me." It was more than humility. It was truth. Pac had a way of turning even a studio session into a life lesson. He taught Snoop that real strength wasn't measured by fame or fortune, but by presence, by how you show up for your people. "He was training me," Snoop said years later, realizing that the mentorship went far beyond music. Those lessons of patience, care, and responsibility became the blueprint for the man Snoop would become. After Pac's death, he channeled that wisdom into something tangible: the Snoop Youth Football League, founded in 2005. It started as a way to keep kids off the streets, but it grew into a movement that changed lives across Los Angeles. The same compassion Tupac showed for Cordy became the heartbeat of a program that produced future stars like Houston Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud and NFL wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster. When Snoop says, "Every kid that plays in my league is my baby. They may outgrow my lap, but they'll never outgrow my heart," it's clear that what Tupac sparked in him never faded. In a sense, Tupac's influence reached far beyond the studio walls or the hip-hop charts. Through Snoop, he helped shape a generation of young athletes, dreamers, and kids from the same kinds of neighborhoods they both came from. It's proof that even in death, Tupac's lessons didn't stop teaching. They simply found a new way to live on. But as those fatherly lessons took root in Snoop's heart, the world outside was turning darker, and the brotherhood that once built legends was about to be tested in the most devastating way imaginable. By 1996, hip-hop had become a battlefield. What started as lyrical competition between coasts had exploded into a full-blown war of pride, money, and survival. The East Coast versus West Coast feud wasn't just about music anymore, it was blood deep. At the center of it all stood Tupac Shakur, newly released from prison after Suge Knight posted a $1.4 billion bail to sign him to Death Row Records. Pac came out of jail a changed man, angrier, sharper, and convinced the industry had betrayed him. He felt ambushed by fake friends, targeted by rivals, and misunderstood by the world. He wanted to reclaim respect with force. And when he dropped Hit Them Up in June 1996, he did exactly that. The song wasn't just a diss track. It was an open declaration of war against the notorious B.I.G., Bad Boy Records, and anyone aligned with them. Every line dripped with venom. It was Pac's most explosive moment, and in many ways, his most dangerous. Snoop Dogg, however, saw things differently. He was loyal to the West Coast, but he didn't believe peace made you weak. During an interview with Big Boy, he admitted, "Even when he played me Hit 'Em Up, I didn't like it. You buying problems because gangstas is everywhere." Snoop understood that in the streets, violence didn't come with warning shots, and what Pac was stirring could come back around. While Pac was focused on revenge, Snoop was searching for resolution. One man was ready for war, the other was praying for calm. And that difference in energy, fire versus water, began to create cracks in their friendship. Then came the moment that broke everything. Snoop went to New York for a radio interview and was asked how he felt about Puffy and Biggie. With his usual laid-back honesty, he said, "I like Puffy and Biggie. I want to do music with them." To Snoop, it was no big deal. He respected their artistry. But to Pac, it was betrayal. Those were the same men he believed set him up in 1994 when he was shot 5 times at Quad Studios. To hear his brother publicly praise them cut deep. Snoop later reflected, "Man, a week before he died, we was best of friends. 2 days before, I don't think he liked me." Inside Death Row, the tension was suffocating. Pac and Suge were on edge, and Snoop felt the shift. On a flight shortly after, he sat quietly across from them, fearing things could turn. He later revealed he kept a knife hidden, just in case. The director of All Eyes on Me, Benny Boom, even confirmed that scene, explaining, "Tupac was originally a Blood, Snoop was a Crip. Even when you've made it out, those loyalties remain." It was a chilling reminder that no matter how famous they'd become, they were still men raised in worlds where trust could get you killed. Imagine that. 2 brothers who once shared weed, dreams, and history, now sitting in silence, worlds apart. The bond that once held the West Coast together was fracturing right before their eyes. "We were brothers who suddenly became strangers," Snoop said years later. And the saddest part? Neither of them knew their time was almost up. Because just when it seemed like their friendship might never recover, tragedy struck, and the world would lose Tupac forever. It was September 7th, 1996, a hot desert night in Las Vegas, buzzing with celebrity and adrenaline. The city pulsed with excitement as Mike Tyson prepared to step into the ring at the MGM Grand, a magnet for every star, hustler, and mogul who wanted to be seen. Among the glittering crowd that night was Tupac Shakur, alongside Suge Knight and members of the Death Row entourage. Tupac had just celebrated another victory for his label, smiling for cameras, posing with fans, untouchable, or so it seemed. But in less than 3 hours, that same car he climbed into, a black BMW 750, would become a crime scene that changed hip-hop forever. As they left the MGM Grand, a confrontation broke out in the lobby between Tupac's crew and a member of the Southside Crips, Orlando Anderson. Surveillance cameras captured Pac throwing the first punch. Moments later, Suge ordered everyone back to the car, furious and hyped. What happened next would haunt the culture for decades. While sitting at a red light near Flamingo Road, a white Cadillac pulled up beside their BMW. A burst of gunfire shattered the calm of the Vegas Strip. Tupac was struck multiple times, in the chest, the arm, and the thigh, while Suge, though grazed by fragments, somehow managed to speed away, blood on his head, but alive. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds, but its echo still hasn't faded. When Snoop Dogg got the call, he dropped everything. He drove straight from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, heart pounding, hoping for the best, but fearing the worst. His first stop was Suge Knight's mansion. Shuggy, his head wrapped in white bandages, tried to reassure him. Pac's gonna be all right. He's been shot 9 times before. He'll pull through. But when Snoop finally walked into that hospital room, reality hit harder than any lyric he'd ever written. Tupac lay motionless, tubes in his body, machines rhythmically beeping like a countdown. Snoop later said, "When I walked in, I could just feel like he wasn't even there, and I fainted." When he opened his eyes, someone was holding him. Tupac's mother, the legendary activist Afeni Shakur. Even in her grief, she showed strength that few could comprehend. She told him softly but firmly, "My baby ain't never seen you weak. I don't want you to be weak in front of him. Go to the bathroom, fix yourself up, and come back." Her words carried both grace and command, reminding Snoop of what Tupac stood for: resilience in the face of pain. Snoop composed himself, wiped his tears, and walked back to his brother's bedside. He leaned down, whispered, "I love you, man," and said everything that words couldn't express. Years later, on Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, Snoop recalled that moment through tears. "I knew that was going to be my last time speaking with him," he said. 6 days later, on September 13th, Tupac Shakur was gone, just 25 years old, the brightest light of the West Coast, extinguished before he could reach his full power. For Snoop, the grief came with a heavy dose of guilt. He never got to make peace. He never got to apologize for the misunderstanding that had stood between them. And for years, he carried that silence like a shadow, while the world kept asking questions he wasn't ready to answer. Because the truth wasn't about music or fame or even legacy. It was about losing a brother and realizing that some goodbyes come too late. When Tupac died, it wasn't just the end of a friendship. It was the end of an era. The East Coast-West Coast feud suddenly felt meaningless. Snoop said in interviews later, "After he passed, I realized it was all bullshit. None of that mattered. But grief has a strange way of transforming people." In the years that followed, Snoop became a husband, a father, and a mentor. He welcomed his second son, Cordell, in 1997 and tried to be the kind of dad Tupac had taught him to be. He started putting his energy into something new: football. At first, it was just a way to keep his kids out of trouble. But it grew into something much bigger: the Snoop Youth Football League. He told The Rich Eisen Show, "Coaching the roughest kids in the city taught me how to be a father." By 2005, hundreds of kids were playing under his program. And years later, some of them, like Juju Smith-Schuster and CJ Stroud, would make it to the NFL. When asked how it felt, Snoop smiled and said, "Every kid in my league is my baby. They may outgrow my lap, but they'll never outgrow my heart." Those words hit differently when you realize who inspired them: Pac. It's as if every touchdown, every young kid saved from the streets was Snoop's way of keeping his friend alive. And for the next 2 decades, that quiet tribute turned into a legacy of its own. Fast forward to 2017. Brooklyn's Barclays Center is packed for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And on stage, Snoop Dogg takes the mic, not as the jokester or the gangsta rapper, but as the man who finally found peace. He's there to induct Tupac Shakur. And for the first time in public, he lets his heart speak. While many remember him as some kind of thugged-out superhero, Snoop said, "Tupac really was only good. To be human is to be many things: strong and bold, hard-headed and intellectual, loving and vengeful." He talked about their wild stories, like that time they went parasailing together after Snoop beat his case. "Me and Pac were floating above the ocean, high as hell, and he started telling me about a movie idea where I'd be the star. I wasn't paying attention, but after he passed, I started getting movie roles. Pac was looking out for me even after he was gone." The crowd laughed, but the emotion was heavy because behind every joke was pain, 20 years of it. Toward the end, Snoop said something that summed up everything Pac stood for. Pac's not just hip-hop history. He's American history. So do your research. I'm not talking about Pac the rapper. I'm talking about Pac the human being. That line, Pac the human being, was Snoop's way of closing the wound. After years of silence, guilt, and grief, he finally said what he needed to say. In recent years, Snoop has become more open about what really happened between him and Tupac. He told Logan Paul that they weren't on good terms before Pac's death and that it still hurts him to this day. He said, "She knew there was tension, but she knew how much we loved each other." He also admitted that Hit Them Up scared him, not because of Pac's words, but because of what it represented. Looking back, he understands that Tupac was living in constant survival mode: paranoia, anger, betrayal. But Snoop refuses to let that be Pac's legacy. He wants people to remember the laughter, the creativity, the brotherhood. In another interview, Snoop said Pac was training me without realizing it, that he became a better father, a better man, because of what Pac showed him. And when people ask if he still feels Pac's presence, Snoop doesn't hesitate. Yeah, man, every time I'm doing something positive, that's him right there. You can see it when he mentors young artists, when he performs with that same fearless energy, or when he speaks about loyalty and brotherhood. It's not nostalgia, it's continuation. Pac may have 25, but through Snoop, he never really left. Today, Snoop Dogg stands as one of hip-hop's most respected elders. He's gone from gangsta rapper to coach, entrepreneur, actor, and cultural icon. But if you ask him who taught him the most about life, the answer will always be Tupac. Because when Pac looked at Snoop, he didn't see competition. He saw potential. He saw a future. And Snoop has spent the last 3 decades living up to that vision. At the end of his Hall of Fame speech, Snoop said something that still gives fans chills. It's funny because after he passed away, I started getting movie roles, all this stuff. Pac was looking out for us even after he was gone. That's not just nostalgia. That's faith. Faith that love outlasts pain. That brotherhood can survive even after bullets and betrayal. Tupac Shakur's death changed hip-hop forever, but Snoop Dogg's honesty, his willingness to finally break the silence, reminds us that even legends carry scars. So maybe this isn't just about loss, maybe it's about redemption. Because when Snoop says, "He was training me," what he really means is, Pac's still here. So here's the real question. Do you think Snoop's guilt shaped who he became? Or do you think he was always destined to evolve this way? And if Tupac had lived, would their friendship have changed hip-hop's future? Drop your thoughts below, because this story isn't over. The truth about Tupac and Snoop Dogg's brotherhood is still being written every single day.